In the middle of the that Kliyoker yesterday, we're in the middle about the Chometz, the Korban Toda, the Korban Mincha. Toda. What was it? Yeah. Derech Sheni, you see it. Another approach. Yosid Nochum the Korban Lishma. He says this seems to be more appropriate to understand the pasuk. Shamatza simin el hachno. This is what he says here, as many others say. Matzah, in terms of its physical characteristics, it represents submission. Why? Ki isas matzah ole lamala lamala. Matzah is flat, doesn't rise. Umatzah shel chag apesach yuchiach ki hu simin cherus ugula. It's an indication of what? Of Cheres and Gula Matzah. Matzah represents Cheres and Gula. Why? Because Jews themselves, they minimize themselves. They don't boast. That was Hashem's interest in us. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, Lo mi rubchem mikol amim, choshek Hashem bochem. It's not because of your numbers, because of your multitudes. That's why Hashem desired you. Ki atem ma'at, because of all the nations we're the least in number. Ki ma Hashem sho'om imoch kim liyiro. All Hashem wants is you should fear Him. So what do you for fear? If a person is preoccupied with himself, you don't notice Hashem. So sha'anova mevil lidei yiro kol od she'achno mitzuya batachtonim biyoser. He says the more we find people humility, submitting themselves on the terrestrial level, the more people, if people see less of themselves, they'll see more Malchus Shamayim in existence. Because who's the exalted one? Who's cloaked in majesty? It's only Him, not us. Now this is very important. Why do we have to go to Mitzrayim? Why? You know, it's interesting. La'achniyam b'kura oni, to really to subdue them in the crucible of poverty. V'chosu b'shem Hashem, and they took refuge in the name of Hashem. Av'ayidei hachno yotzu l'cheirus min amalchus, and because of this humility, they were able to excrete themselves to the cherus, from the kingdoms. Right? Hashem says, you know, yeah, we can make an exchange. You don't want to be under the domination of the nations of the world. If you want exchange, what? Good. Hashem says, I'm willing to be. But the only way I could be your king, you have to submit. What happens if you don't recognize me? To be free, just to be free, and you're going to be independent players, there's no such thing. Every human being is under somebody's domination. It's either a mortal king or Hashem. But what criteria you have to meet to be under Hashem? You have to recognize Him to be the king. The only way you could recognize Hashem to be king, you need hachno, you need submission. So therefore, it was only through Golus Mitzrayim, through poverty, and through the pain and the being humiliated and being treated as a chattel, then we were able to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what if He throws us to the dogs? That's when He throws us. That's when Golus happens. All the success and power, it's ours. Hashem says, "Okay, you're on your own. You're on your own. Then you're under the domination of the nations of the world." It's interesting. It's because we were impoverished and we submitted and we were humiliated. Therefore, we were in the mindset that we're able to recognize Hashem. Correct.
That's the difficulty with Matzah, that the say it represents both the slavery and the freedom. The question is how to
So with this, it's good.
With this is good. I've always wondered. It's a wonderful thought. That's really what the wicked son is saying. Is how can you define yourself as free? Just swap one master for another.
That question is not really a difficult question. I'll give you an example. Guy works for a tyrant. He pays him a pittance. Then somebody else hires him, pays him unlimited amounts of money, treats him like a king, as if he's the employer. Well, so what did you accomplish? You swap one master for another. Could you compare the two? You understand? Same thing. One is mortal, one is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No comparison. I understand. What was it? It's interesting. It was just that I mentioned it was a wedding. So this person, secular guy, a lawyer, has slight connection to Yiddishkeit, and he said over something, talking about a yard site, that this person had a yard site. He was observing the yard site for a parent. So his secular friend says to him, "Yard site. Well, you know, your parents are, when they're alive, you do something to them. Then alive, what are you wasting your time? You have to memorialize their memory. What's the value of that? You know, you got to take care of your own life. What are you busy with this? You understand? Just the statement itself at such a level of disrespect. You know what I mean? What about what your parents provided? So this person has relevance to submit to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I understand that. He has relevance. I mean, he's totally, what's good for me, I do. What's not good for me, I'm out of here. That's where this person's at.
That's the goy. That's the goy. That's the claim when the Romans come to Kodesh Baruch Hu. They say, you know, you did all this.
So what I was thinking, there's a Ksav Sofer. The Ksav Sofer says that he cites, it's from many years ago. I haven't seen it in many years. When I say many years ago, I say minimally 40 years ago. This Ksav Sofer. The Ksav Sofer writes, he quotes, I think it's Abaye in the Medrash, that he says that Avram Avinu was more humble than Moshe. Than Moshe Rabbeinu. This how's it possible? Torah says Moshe Odom v'kol Odom. So how could the Medrash say? I think it was Abaye. See, he explains it this way, similar to what he's saying over here. He says Avram Avinu, minimally more than 50% of his life, he was a pariah. He was a fugitive. He was poor. He had nothing. Then he came to wealth towards the end of his life. So a person who's raised in poverty and being deprived, that person has a greater relevance to humility than a person who was raised like a prince and treated and was the center of attraction. And despite that, you're humble. So that's the difference. Avram came to humility. That was his state of being, because that was his whole upbringing. And those were his experiences in life. To be denied and to be persecuted and to be prosecuted and to be discriminated and to be humiliated. So okay, a person's naturally humble. Moshe was a prince. He was Beis Shel Melech. And despite that, and that's the reason why he says, we find his parents gave him 7 names. Tov, Tuvia, Tuvi, all the name the Torah identifies with is Moshe. Bas Paro. Why? To bring up this point, that despite the fact that he was Moshe, he was the grandson of a king, and the adopted son of a princess. Despite that, that's why it's Moshe, to bring out that point. Still, he was the Onav. You think with that kind of upbringing, with such attention, despite that, that's what he says. But he says again, what's the core? He says, what's the core novo? What is this crucible that brings to humility? Only poverty, being a slave, that. Lefichoch, dina chomitz b'sreifa. What do? We burn the chomitz. Dafka ki nimus kudusin hu shekol hamizgor nidem beish. Because he says, quotes the Gemara, Kidisa Medrash, a person who's a Balgaivi deserves to be burnt in fire. Medrash al Posuk, Zos Torah Ola. He Ola al Mokta. Hear this. Ola is the burnt off, but Ola means the person who raises himself. You know what that person deserves? To be thrown into the fire. Al Mokta. Ki arotza lalus lamala malo kiteva chometz. Ola lamalo. Person who wants to assume the characteristics of chometz always to be, to what? To be fully invested with himself. Roy lidun beish ashetivo lalus lamalo lficho din chometz b'mashu. Now he says something interesting. This is a rabbinical law. The halacha is rabbinically. Normally we speak about you have a ratio 60-1. It's botel. It's subsumed. Chometz, the Pesach, even if it's a minuscule, infinitesimal amount of chometz falls into endless ratios versus it, it's not botel. Why? Why even a mashu? She says chometz is gaiva. Ki amido sorach odom leilach b'derech hamutza. Regarding any characteristic, we always say you have to take the midpoint. The golden path is the midpoint. When it comes to gaiva, you have to go to the extreme, the opposite extreme. Sharmu chazal lo mino v'lo mikzoso. You don't want to have any relevance to gaiva. Hari she'osru afilu mashu min gaiva. Even the smallest amount, the trace of gaiva is a problem. Kach mashu min chometz osur. Since chometz and gaiva, they're synonymous. One's a representation of the other. Cheromer azal ma'od ma'od havish varuach. Right? It reiterates ma'od. You should be low-spirited very, very much. This alludes to the degree of this issue, to distance itself to the ultimate level. No question, no question. Because that's the representation. So that was the difference. Why by Toda yes, and why by Shtei Alechem Seiks? That was the Sefarno. Because the only reason why it's a miracle is because you'd really deserve to die. Because of the Yetzer Hara, because what you did wrong. Despite that, that's what Chayv Lahodos. Therefore, you have to thank Hashem that you're alive. It was only due to his Rachmim, that's why you're alive. Okay, let's see the moral. But it's not gaiva. It's not gaiva. It's not gaiva. You feel privileged. You feel privileged. It's like, thank God I'm a Jew. You know, I'm not an animal. That's not gaiva. That's the recognition that you're appreciative. You know? You see a person, a drug addict, the person destroyed his life. And you know, you could have been that and say, Baruch Hashem, I never took that path. That's not gaiva. That's just basic, you know, appreciation for what decency is. I'm not associated with that. I don't know who puts it there. You know, it's interesting. A lot of these concepts we're discussing, to discuss it with young people, like teenagers, it's very difficult to get it. To differentiate between feeling privileged and gaiva, it's very different. It's very difficult to make that. They can't make that differentiation. No, I'm saying even, you know, it says you shouldn't pride yourself. What's wrong with pride? I feel proud. It's a very fine line, and unless you have a certain degree of maturity, that fine line you don't sense. It's either you sense the fine line or you don't sense. It's not an intellectualism. Okay.